Welcome back to the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with me, Tony Murrell. This week's special guest is legendary football commentator Elton Welsby, the voice behind some of the most iconic moments in football history. In this episode, he shares stories from his time in the commentary box, his views on the modern game, and the highs and lows of a life spent in sports broadcasting. Thanks for listening and watching this episode. Welcome to the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with me, Tony Murrell, and this week's special guest is former TV sports commentator Elton Welsby. Thanks for coming on the Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Elton.
The ageing Elton Welsby. 73 now, Tony.
73.
Yeah.
How are we anyway, mate? How are you doing?
Yeah, terrific. Apart from my back, I mentioned that to you before. That's why I'm propped up here, you know, because I've got to sit in a place where my back doesn't ache.
Yeah. Oh, listen, just want to say thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast and inviting us over and stuff like that.
Problem.
But yeah, I just want to start from where you grew up, where you're from, family life and school life was like for you.
Well, originally, St Helens, you know, it's a babby. St Helens. So there's a bit of rugby league in my DNA, you know. I don't know anyone from St Helens. All my relatives are in St Helens who don't follow the Saints, you know. And I'm the same. Yeah. I love the Saints. My worst type of day happened last Saturday when Everton lost at home to Brighton, and later on, Saints lost at Wigan. Now, there are two games that I cannot stand, really. I put myself through it. I do watch them. One is Liverpool-Everton. Yeah. Can't stand it. And the other is St Helens-Wigan. Can't stand that either. So, yeah. So, St Helens originally. My father was in the bank, and he was promoted to the branch in Birkenhead, and we lived in Mells, but only for 2 years, and then he got promoted again to Macclesfield. Now, believe it or not, Macclesfield, sleepy little Cheshire town, that's where my love of football began. Because my dad thought one Saturday afternoon, would you like to go and watch football? And so he took me to the Moss Rose to watch Macclesfield. And that's where I got the football bug. And on one occasion, this was long before the days of mascots, you understand, but there was it was a special occasion at the ground, and sort of a load of school children would walk out hand in hand with each of the players. And I was one of them. My dad fixed it up that I could be one of them. And I walked out hand in hand with Neil Franklin. Now, that probably doesn't mean anything to you or to any of the people who are watching this podcast, but Neil Franklin was the first English player ever to leave and play abroad. He played for Bogota in Colombia. He didn't like it, didn't settle, and he was back, I think, after a few months, you know. He went for the money, fair enough, because there wasn't much. I mean, there was the maximum wage down in this country, but he went for a lot more than that. But when he got back, he found himself ostracised, basically. He was an England international. Some say, those are a bit like me long in the tooth, although I never saw him play for England, that he was probably England's best defensive centre-half, possibly of all time. But that was the end of it. He came back, he was in his prime, but he was banned from playing for England because he made the move to Bogota. Crazy. So that's how my love of football began.
How did your love for Everton come about then?
Well, simple. My dad got promotion again. He became manager of the NatWest in Fairfield in Liverpool, which is on the junction. The bank is on the junction of Laurel Road and Prescott Road, and right opposite was a garage which was run by Sidney Moss, who was then a director of Liverpool. So the week before I first went to Goodison, the week before we tried to get into Anfield. I think Liverpool played Blackpool, and because at Macclesfield we just used to turn up, pay the turnstiles, and go in. In our naivety, we assumed that would be the same at Anfield. Wrong, and we couldn't get in. So my dad thought, well, we're not going to make the same mistake twice. So he had a word with Sidney Moss, and despite being a Liverpool director, Sidney was able to get us ticket for Everton the following Saturday, and it was Everton against Cardiff City. April 1962. Everton won 8-3. And the guy who ran the game was Alex Young, who became and remains my hero. He's the one. And I met him, spent quite a bit of time with him actually, in later years. And he just, I mean, he scored a couple, I think. Billy Bingham scored, needless to say, Roy Vernon scored. And that was the team, little did I know at the time, that 12 months later would win the title, beating Fulham 4-1 at Goodison.
How old was you at this time?
Roy Vernon with a hat-trick. In 1962, I was 11. Yeah. So I was manufactured. I wasn't born a blue. I was actually manufactured, but of a very young age.
Yeah.
It's the same, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But sharing them memories with your dad as well is a big thing as well.
Oh, fabulous! Yeah, very much.
Goodison in the 60s, like back in the what was it like?
Well, it's not much different than it is today. Just more people inside. You know, since the Taylor report, you know, we're down to what are we now?
39,000.
39,000. Yeah, I mean, for those games, there were over 50,000, approaching 60. It was unbelievable. When we won the Youth Cup in '65, there must have been 35,000 people there for that alone. And you know, I was part of a pitch invasion. I don't mind admitting it, folks. But it was a friendly pitch invasion at the end. We had the youth team players, you know, carrying. I was a youth team player. I was only 14, and we were hoisting them up. It was fabulous.
Yeah. Did you have brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only child.
You were an only child, so there's just yourself and your dad.
Yeah.
That used to go along.
Yeah.
What was school life?
Oh, my dad. In the 60s, round about 65, 66, if Everton weren't at home and I wasn't at school, I'll explain that in a moment, we actually used to go to Old Trafford. We went about 2 or 3 times to Old Trafford, purely to see George Best. No other reason. I had no affiliation with Man United. My dad being in the bank, you know, they have long tentacles, and he was able to get tickets for Old Trafford. And we went there purely to see George Best.
What was George Best like live?
Oh, I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, it was so precocious. I mean, he used to run and twist and turn. It was as if the ball was tied to his boot, you know, and of course, score goals too. He was wonderful to watch.
Yeah, a lot of people said George Best, in that era, was one of the best players they'd ever seen.
Oh, without doubt. He's in my top 3 of best players I've seen live, you know, which is, I don't judge it by, I don't judge, for example, how good was Stanley Matthews or how good was Tom Finney, because I didn't see them live. I like to see them live. The person who compared Finney and Matthews was my old sparring partner, Bill Shankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had Tom Finney better than Stanley Matthews.
Is that what he said? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he used to play with Finney at Preston.
Yeah. What was Shankly like? I know a lot of people say, what he done honours wise and what he done for Liverpool. I think you had the honour of interviewing him from. I think that was one of your first jobs, wasn't it?
In the newspaper.
Yeah,
for the Liverpool Weekly News.
What was that like?
Well, I rang him. To be honest with you, Liverpool Weekly News. My name's Elton Welsby, Liverpool Weekly. I didn't think I'd get through the switchboard. I didn't think I'd get past the switchboard. I'd like to speak to Mr. Shankly. I was put through. Hello.
It's a day in the life of a football manager.
I work for a provisional paper called the Liverpool Weekly News. We'd like to. I know it. Oh, Christ, that's something. I'd like to come and spend, the best part of a day with you, really, so I can write a piece called "A Day in the Life of a Football Manager." Yeah. And he said, "Right, next Thursday. How's that?" I said, "That's fine." So I went to Anfield. We went in his car to Melwood with Joe Fagan. Watched all the training. Had a cup of tea afterwards at Melwood, and came back and then sat in his office while he. He spoke on the phone to whoever he was speaking on the phone to. He did one. It was it was one, you know, and he anyway picked the phone. Just a minute, son. He said to me, just a minute, son. He picked the phone up and he went, hello. Ah, big man. How you doing, big man? Ah, right. Okay, big man. Right. See you, big man. He looked at me and went, that was the big man. It was Ron Yates.
Was it Ron Yates? Yeah.
And I still don't know what Ron rang him for. I had no idea what the conversation was about because all I heard was, hey, big man.
It was just having that insight to see, and obviously how he run the football
Oh,
club.
fantastic, yeah.
And what was he like as a person himself? Was he?
Off the wall. Very, very weird. His life was football.
He lived and breathed football.
Yeah.
Like.
I mean, I think he once said, and it was into Granada, but not with me, that, you know, he could, during his time as manager at Liverpool, he'd taken his wife out, Nessie, 2 or 3 times, I think it was, in that entire time.
While he was football manager,
yeah. I mean, she was always welcome to go if you wanted to go and watch a game elsewhere, scouting if you like, or watching a player. You know, he said, I always offered to take her with me, but she wasn't interested. Yeah, oh, really, wonderful company. Wonderful company.
From there, was it, you know, the job in media, you were broadcasting Radio City, Granada TV and stuff like that. Where did it escalate from there? Was it from there, from the paper that you went to them, you know, them broadcasters and stuff?
Well, when I left school under a cloud, my dad got me a job with the Royal Insurance in Liverpool, in the city centre. And I did that for 12 months and I hated every minute of it. It was awful. It wasn't me. I mean, I'm numerically dyslexic to start with, and it was all figures. It was mathematics, basically, without computers in those days either.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't whip out your phone and go, you know, you had to do it in your head. Well, it was hopeless. I couldn't do that. So it was a nightmare, 12 months. And my parents were on holiday, funnily enough. And I just went into the floor manager at the Royal, the first floor, yeah, and just said, I'm leaving. And he said, well, normally we require you to work 1 month's notice, but you can go now. Bugger off. So a friend of mine, father, was Dr. Jack Davidson, who at that time was the top medical guy at Broad Green Hospital, and he got me a job. It was only going to be a short while, you know, to fill in, to earn a few bob kind of thing for maybe a few weeks, a couple of months, something like that. And so I became a porter at Broad Green Hospital. That would have been in 1969, and I loved it. I mean, there were some horrible things to do, don't get me wrong. Whew, you know, regular trips to the mortuary and things like that. But you met people from all walks of life. You know, you go into a ward and you could walk in and you were taking someone, say, to X-ray or wherever, or down to theatre for an operation. Could be almost like a homeless person. By the same token, the little sort of side wards where the very, very hoi polloi, the well-to-do.
Everyone's got different stories that you're engaging in conversation.
So it was a great learning curve and life, you know, yeah. So basically, after about 10 months, I was there for precisely a year, 365 days I was there. So round about the 320 days mark, I thought, I know I love this, but I've got to get a vocation. I've got to find something I want to do, you know, for life kind of thing. And anyway, I was wheeling somebody down. Broad Green was like an H block.
Not prison cell block H, was it?
No, there were 2 huge corridors with an adjoining corridor. So I was going down one of these corridors where they sold the grapes and the books and the magazines for the visitors to buy for the patients. And there was this paper there, the Liverpool Weekly News, about 20 papers stacked up for sale. I'd never heard of this paper. I didn't know what it was. So I bought it, and when I got back to the porter's room, sat down, cup of tea, started reading the paper. There must have been 10, 12 pages of sport. Now, a lot of them, they also, what they did and why the paper sold so well, one of the reasons the paper sold so well, was it had all the results of the amateur football leagues on Merseyside. You know, so there was like 6 pages. I mean, the Liverpool and District Sunday League alone was the biggest league anywhere in Europe at that time. Yeah. So I thought, I like this. So when I got home, I wrote a letter to, I found out who the managing director was, a fellow called Ron Carrington, operating out of Widnes. So I wrote to him a letter saying my background, my education, etc. You know, and I really think journalism is for me. Can I come and see you? Look at me. I put on the top of the paper, you know, the home phone number, and cracky, about a day or so later, he rang. I had a chat with him. He said, well, can you come down and see me? I said, yeah, when? He said, how about tomorrow? I said, that's fine. I went down, had the interview with him. Obviously it went well, because it seemed like, this is what I say, obviously probably took 48 hours, but it seemed like by the time I got home, I got the job, you know. But anyway, I did get the job, and because I wasn't on contract at the hospital, I could leave literally straight away, yeah. A bit like the way I left the Royal. And yeah, and
just went from there.
That was the start. That was my start in journalism.
So, like from there, was it like, you know, was you covering like you say, amateur football, or was you covering like Everton, Liverpool, or Tranmere?
Yeah, I could do didn't do Tranmere, but we had season press box tickets per season for Anfield and Goodison. But I spent most of my time at Holly Park. Where's Holly Park? It was then the Northern Premier League, South Liverpool. I just fell in love with the club. I loved it. Loved
South
the players.
Liverpool, was it? Yeah.
South Liverpool Football Club, from where John Aldridge came and Jimmy Case. Yeah, but I used to love it. I used to travel with the team on the coach. You know, I used to do match reports. So I could have gone to Anfield or Goodison, but I chose South Liverpool. Yeah.
What was it about South Liverpool?
I never went to Liverpool or Everton.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, if South had a very unattractive match, you know, somewhere or other, I'd say, and see Everton were home, so then I'd go there, yeah.
Yeah, but what was it that attracted you to South Liverpool? Was it just the people around the place and
stuff? Well,
stuff?
partly, yeah, but the papers throughout Liverpool, the papers sold best in the South End for some reason. Garston, you know, used to have thousands of copies in Garston, and that's where South Liverpool, Holly Park, Garston. You know, that's where South Liverpool was based. So it was also it's quite sensible to ingratiate myself at South Liverpool, because I got stories that you know, the locals around South Liverpool you know, would appreciate.
No, that's it. But then it became, obviously, being an Evertonian, you started covering Liverpool home and away. That became a big part of your, you know.
When I went to Radio City, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was at the Weekly News for 4 years, and perchance, you know, after 4 years, Radio City was on the horizon, you know. So I applied to Radio City. I'd done a little bit of work at Radio Merseyside. Nothing spectacular. Bob Azurdia said, you know, if you'd want to come and maybe read out the football results or the racing results, you know.
Get some experience and stuff like that, yeah.
Just to use the voice and get, you know, my voice was sort of had a much higher pitch then than it does now. And so, yeah, that's how I went for the interview at Radio City. David Maker, was he sort of like the news editor or manager of that sort of section. He just said, yeah, come on, you join us. In fact, they were going on air about 10 days later. They were going on air on the 21st of October 1974. That was the birthday of Radio City.
Yeah. And obviously we're speaking, hopefully something coming up in an anniversary.
Yep, the 50th anniversary of Radio City's launch is October the 21st, coming up, just a few weeks away. And there's a reunion dinner, luncheon, should I say, at the Cavern, Matthew Street, for the originals. Only the originals. No originals and their partners or whatever. Just the originals.
Yeah.
Those who are still with us.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a lot there. So from being introduced to Radio City and being, how was it following Liverpool home and away at that time, you know?
It was business. I realised that, you know...
You've got to put that to one side, being
I had a knack for radio commentary.
Yeah.
You know, that was quite clear. And I thought, well, you know, I can't be at Radio City my entire life, so, you know, I've got to look to the future as well. Mm. And, I mean, I could have, for example, lived in Carlisle and commentated and reported on football for Radio Cumbria. That wouldn't have got me noticed. The fact that I was at Radio City in Liverpool and covering Liverpool, you know, who were winning
everything.
The league, literally winning everything.
Us being Evertonians, don't
winning, exactly.
Especially our producer Ben, who's a big red, he'll be smiling behind the camera there, but
no, it's true. But it was business.
Yeah.
You know, now, Evertonians at that time were convinced I was a Liverpool fan, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
And I probably came, in a sense, I suppose, I wanted them to do well because Liverpool doing well meant I did well.
Yeah.
Simple. European Cup 1977, crikey. I wanted them to win because I became the youngest commentator ever at a European Cup final.
Was that the day for Fairclough where he scored the winner? Was that one Saint Etienne, was it, or?
No, that was the quarter-final.
What was
quarter-final.
But that's still when you were commentating. It's still like everyone remembers you commentating on that game and Fairclough scored the winner, wasn't it?
I mean, I remember what I said for that goal purely because Phil Thompson told me, because he was in hospital, and when I said, hang on, Liverpool playing too many long balls, too many hopeful balls, and there's another one, and it's broken for Fairclough. And Phil Thompson fell out of bed. True story.
Yeah. But you must have had some unbelievable. And then, did you build up relationships with the players, the management, and that?
Well, Ray Clemens, for example, was best man at my wedding.
Yeah.
So but I go. They all knew. Evertonians didn't know I was an Evertonian.
Yeah.
The Liverpool players did, and you know, Bob Paisley was so good to me that if it was an away match I was commentating on, he'd come back with us, come on the coach. And this became a regular thing. I'd travel with the team. Always sit at the front, never join them. That was their time, that was their space. But I used to walk on the coach, and you know, it's a typical, you know, Terry McDermott or someone else go, "See you having a lot today?" Hey, you know, thank you.
Yeah.
I go, yeah, well, never mind.
But some great experiences with them, yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Any what was one of the favourites that sticks out for you?
Favourites? What, in terms of trip?
Yeah, no, with the occasion for, like, obviously, you know, could have been a cup final.
Oh, Saint Etienne was.
Yeah,
it was very much because of how it.
The atmosphere.
Funnily enough, the MD of Radio City, Terry Smith, who became in later years a Liverpool director, big Liverpool fan, and the same night as Liverpool Saint Etienne, we were playing Aston Villa in the replay of the League Cup final. And I said to Terry, listen, I should be at, you know, to cup final, I should be there as Radio City's main commentator. That's the main game. And he said, no, it's not. You're going to Liverpool Saint Etienne. I said, oh, come on, Terry, please. It's a replay cup final. He said, you only want to go because you're an Everton fan. I said, well, that's part of it, yes. But no, I think the station should cover it. Well, we're sending, I forgot who went now. I think by then it was probably Clive Tilsley.
Yeah.
But he said, you're the main man, you go to Anfield. And of course, that bit of commentary, I don't know, it sort of almost defined my radio career. It's the thing that
you remember. Like,
yeah. I mean, this time last year, I was with David Fairclough at Stan Boardman's place, which is not far from here. And David was talking about it. He talked about his goal. 1977, and he wanted to talk about that goal.
But stuff like that they remember, and you know, a lot of Liverpool fans will remember hearing that commentary, and it sticks with them. You know what I mean? And
well, you couldn't get a ticket for love nor money for
Yeah.
for Anfield for that night.
No,
It was like in '76 when they played Barcelona, the return leg against Barcelona.
yeah,
And I was then with my fiancée Joyce and a couple of friends. You know, Neil, can you get us tickets for the game? I said, bloody hell, you try and get it. You know, Johan Cruyff, Barcelona. You know, you couldn't get the tickets. Was being sold on the black market. It's unbelievable. I said, well, all I can do is ask. So I went to Peter Robinson, who was secretary of Liverpool at the time, just secretary. The greatest administrator, by the way, I've ever known in football, Peter. And I said to him, look, Peter, I hate to ask, but any chance of 3 tickets for the game tomorrow night? He said, how many do you want? I said, just the 3. He said, well, we can give you a row if you want. He always used to keep back so many tickets for friends of the club, etc., knowing he could sell them on the day of the game quite easily.
yeah.
So I got my 3 tickets. I could have had 33. To be honest with you, that was the only time. That was the only time I asked him.
Yeah. Did you get it much? People asking you for tickets in that Elton? You know.
Well, yes, of course you did. That goes with the territory.
Of course it does, yeah.
I didn't make a habit of it because it would become every other week.
If you're asking all the time.
Oh, and then exactly. And I think Peter appreciated that. You know, I wanted to make an impression, my fiancée and what have you.
As you do.
Yeah, well, as you do, yeah.
What was it like working with Ian St John and Jimmy Greaves?
We're moving on a little bit. The Saint and Greavsie show, I used to do reports for the Saint and Greavsie show.
Is that many years on? Was it from Radio City, sorry?
Oh, been 85.
Oh, yeah.
I think. I forget when Saint and Greavsie actually started. It was in the 80s. Let's leave it in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was inspired by a World Cup. Now, it can't have been 1990, so...
86,
yeah,
86.
86
or
so
82.
Mexico, yeah.
86 was Mexico,
I think
wasn't it?
that's how, yeah. I was in Guadalajara with the
You done
Northern
82,
Ireland team.
that's 82, you had the World Cup as well, weren't you?
I was at the World Cup. That's too early for Saint and Greavsie.
Yeah.
So it would have been the 86 Mexico World Cup.
Yeah.
That's when they put them together as a kind of little feature prior to games,
And it catapulted from
And
there.
of course, it became very, very popular, understandably so. And then it became a standalone. I think it replaced On the Ball, didn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so it became the Saint and Greavsie show. Then I started doing the results show round about 86. So the studio was the Saint and Greavsie at lunchtime, and then the results show at quarter to 5.
Quarter to 5.
You know, so I would also, because I was in the studio and because I was working at London Weekend at that time, I used to go and maybe do a report, an interview, say, for the Saint and Greavsie show. I mean, one of them was the very first interview with Alex Ferguson on the day of his debut game, which was at Oxford. So I stayed over in a hotel, the same hotel as the United team in Oxford. And in the morning, Fergie and I sat down, had a cup of coffee and did the interview. And then legged it back to London Weekend for it to be edited in time for the Saint and Greavsie show.
What was he like, Alex Ferguson?
Always gone on brilliantly with him.
Yeah.
But I worked for a chap at Granada called Paul Doherty. And he was, to say larger than life, a bit of a cliche, but it certainly applies to him. He was my mentor, my friend. He was my guiding light. Without him, I wouldn't have had a career in television. No question about that. And Doherty befriended Alex Ferguson. And actually, Alex Ferguson really was not very comfortable with the press when he first went to Man United. And he turned to Paul for advice on how to handle the press. And so they became very close. And because of the friendship between Fergie and Paul, it was no problem for me.
Yeah.
I was Paul's guy, you know.
he had a bit of a tough start as well, Ferguson, didn't he, when he first went to United?
He did. He had a tough start, and they said it was all down to a Mark Robbins goal, you know, which got them to the cup final eventually, etc. And then after that, of course, the 1991 European Cup Winners' Cup final in Rotterdam. My first trip to Rotterdam, but not my last.
Yeah, but you know what? Funny enough, I was going to get onto that. You know, that night in Rotterdam, for you as an Evertonian to report on, you know, that night. What was that like, Elton? Can you remember the lead up to it and the build up?
Brian Clough was the commentator, co-commentator alongside Brian Moore, and I did an interview with Cloughie at the side of the pitch, probably about an hour before the kickoff.
I watched it this morning, you know. I was watching a little bit this morning.
I've never seen it.
It's on YouTube, it's brilliant, and you can hear the Evertonians in the background all singing it.
Well, what I remember is that Cloughie, I knew him by then, was very well behaved.
Yeah,
you know,
he seemed pretty
okay.
He
can be a nightmare. He can be a nightmare to interview. Here's an example. You'd say to Cloughie, just for example, if I'd have been there, and he'd signed Trevor Francis, you know, for Nottingham Forest from Birmingham, and someone had said, and how much was the fee, Brian? And he went, that has got no business. It's no business of yours at all. That's nothing to do with you. That's between Nottingham Forest Football Club and Birmingham City Football Club.
That's how he spoke.
It's between me and Freddie Goodwin. £1 million. So he'd take you, you think, I'm getting a bollock in here.
Yeah.
You know, and then he'd answer your question. Right at the end of this, I had an experience with him very similar to that, actually. But again, you know, I think Paul Doherty's father was Peter Doherty, who used to play for Man City, Blackpool, amongst others, Doncaster, manager of Northern Ireland for 11 years. In fact, took Northern Ireland to the World Cup in '58, which is, you know, an absolute first. But Paul's dad, Peter, was one of the most admired inside forwards of his generation, a generation alongside Finney, Matthews, etc. He scored a goal every 2 games from midfield. Now that is something else. And I think that's why Paul was able to get to so many people within football, because, you know, I mean, he had a fantastic personality himself, don't get me wrong, but also they knew him as Peter Doherty's son as well.
Yeah,
and Peter Doherty was revered by the likes of Shankly, Clough.
Respected and stuff, and trustworthy and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So that helped.
But going back to Rotterdam with Brian Clough, like I say, I watched the interview this morning, funny enough, and he just seemed dead calm where you see him on some interviews like you've just been explaining, where he was just so calm, and he had so much for Everton saying how, but Forest, I think Forest had beat us a couple of times that season, and he said, oh, how did you go about it? He said, but no, but this team's been at it, this, you know, and you could just hear the Evertonians in the background.
He was still, even though Forest had beaten him, if I remember rightly, he was still very complimentary about Everton.
Very much so, yeah. He had so much, what's the name? He's shown a lot of.
Didn't he say? And I really think, if you don't mind me using the word we, I think he said that. Because I remember he knew I was an Everton fan, but he didn't sort of play on it.
Yeah, he did. He said something along them lines, but it was a fantastic interview, because I thought, I'll have a little watch, you know, a little bit of what's the name for the podcast, and it was just brilliant.
Yeah.
But like you just said there, you see him on some interviews where he's just, that's got nothing to do with you, and he'll go round the houses, and then he'll but he was dead very complimentary about
Well,
Everton.
he was a neutral, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, supposedly.
But that night in Rotterdam, obviously.
Well, the day in Rotterdam, with 85, can I just say about 91, which is later, because you mentioned it. In 91, I was working with Jimmy Greaves and Dennis Law, the 2 greatest goal scorers of my youth. I was awestruck. Yeah. Anyway, 85. Duncan McKenzie and I went for a walk around Rotterdam, and there was a square, you know, in the middle of the city. Loads of police, loads of fans, and we thought, oh God, no. And we got a bit closer, you know, having a look, see what was going on. It was a football match between the fans and the police. and the police's riot gear was marking out the pitch. It was fantastic. It was
To
fantastic.
see that going on before the game, it's just...
Yeah, well, what happened a little bit later?
With Everton, do you mean, or
No,
with all...
Heysel.
Oh, it's Heysel, is this what...
So you saw the good,
The bad.
the bad, not quite the ugly, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The good and the bad. In the space of... I wasn't at Heysel, thank
Right.
goodness. But, you know, you saw the good and the bad of what football can create in the space of a few days.
Yeah, yeah. But the good of, obviously, that at Rotterdam and stuff like that, the
Oh, that was-
Evertonians and stuff like
That was magnificent.
Yeah.
Absolutely magnificent. Our fans, obviously the police had been told, oh, English football fans are hooligans, so they went, you know, they had shields and batons and what have you. And they put those down to mark out a pitch so they could play football, the fans against the cops.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
What was it like inside the stadium?
Oh, come on. Our travelling fans, for me, I'm biased, sure, but our travelling fans are the best. They're brilliant. The noise was superb. Hey, and the Liverpool travelling fans as well. I mean, the 77 European Cup and the 78 one where they filled Wembley. There might have been 2 Bruges supporters in 78.
Two Bruges.
You know, it was just all red.
It was just this,
Yeah. So let's say Merseyside fans are outstanding.
across the board, I think.
But I
so,
do
yeah.
think the Everton travelling fans are something special because they quite often spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time to get there and watch a load of crap and then spend a lot of time to come back. So they have my undying support and admiration.
Yeah. Howard Kendall, what a gentleman he was.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have a good relationship with Howard?
Very good. Very good.
He was a great fella. I worked with him on a couple of dinners and stuff like that in the past,
Yeah.
and he was always... he loved to drink and stuff, but his stories were unbelievable. When he spoke, he was still passionate about, you know the game and his love for Everton and stuff like that. But what a football career he had as well as a player and as a manager.
Well, fairy tale stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, when he signed for Everton, would be 67, wasn't it? 67. I think it was 67.
He played with Ball and Harvey and...
Well, the Holy Trinity,
Yeah,
Kendall,
yeah,
Ball,
yeah,
Harvey.
yeah.
But he signed in 67. I'm sure it was 67, and he was going to Liverpool. In fact, Liverpool had set up a press conference to announce the arrival of Howard Kendall from Preston. And Harry Catterick, no agents in those days, the club secretary didn't do the signings and the negotiations. It was Harry Catterick.
He hijacked it.
And he went cloak and dagger behind the scenes
Hijacked it.
and hijacked it, yeah.
Brought Howard Kendall to
Yeah.
Everton.
And they were waiting at Anfield and he turned up and Goodison. Incredible.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course that gave birth to the Holy Trinity, because we had Ball already, we signed him in 66, Colin obviously one of our own, and then Howard. And they were telepathic, you know. I write in my book that I believe Alf Ramsey dropped a clanger in 1970, for the World Cup in 1970 in Mexico, that he should have, it didn't matter who he dropped, he just had to be tough, but play in midfield, Kendall, Ball and Harvey. Simple.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
And is that in your book? I know obviously we're going to speak about your book, but you're just writing your book.
Yeah,
at the
but
moment.
it is in the book. I felt quite strongly about it. That,
Yeah.
You know, he kind of missed a trick. I mean, when you think about it, they won the league. You know, and they were the three.
Run the show, the
You
midfield.
know,
didn't you?
absolutely. But as just mentioned to you earlier, they were telepathic. I mean, you know.
What is your book called, Elton, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. It's going to be called Game for a Laugh.
And what's it based on? Or just
Me.
No, obviously on yourself, but you know the highs and lows of obviously your life and stuff like that, and everything, or is it just everything, or just across the board?
It's the emphasis is on fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yes, of course. We go back. There's to my childhood. I tell the story I told you about Neil Franklin. Then right the way through, but it's mainly I mean, I'm going to have to. It's going to be difficult to sell it to Liverpool fans because, you know, now obviously I'm a renowned Evertonian, and there's a lot of the stuff early on in the book. It goes back to 62, 63, but there's a lot in the book about Liverpool from my Radio City days because I just became Liverpool's voice on Merseyside at Radio
Home and away
City.
as well, wasn't you?
Home and away. Barely got to see Everton in that 4-year period. I did every now and again, but
Your job,
you know,
your job consisted of going to.
well, number one, my boss was a Liverpool fan. I was the number one commentator, so he basically said, "You go with Liverpool." If I'd have said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to go to
Is the
Goodison,"
door.
yeah, off you go on your bike. I couldn't afford that. So, Blues. What happened with Liverpool from 1974 till round about Christmas 1977 was business. It was a job.
No.
I did my best.
But you enjoyed it as well, though, didn't you?
I did enjoy it, of course I did.
Yeah.
As I said to you just a few moments ago, European Cup final 1977, of course I wanted Liverpool to win it because it meant I would, well, first of all to get there, because that would mean I was the youngest ever commentator of a European Cup final. But obviously, if Liverpool had lost, it would kind of be, who remembers the losers of cup finals? You know. So in other words, they needed to win it to keep that memory.
Yeah. So even though you're retired now, Elton, would you love to be back involved? You know, within
Well,
the
yes, I would certainly enjoy doing certain things. I wouldn't mind doing, say, a stint over in Qatar with Kesey and Andy Gray, because my son's studio director for that program over in Qatar, being sports, you know. So if Richard was to go on holiday, I'd love to go. I'd love to go over there, you know, and sort of do a week or two, you know, say 4 programs alongside Andy. That would be nice. That's sort of my bucket list. But it won't happen.
Yeah.
No, I watch now.
What do you think of the guys on at the moment? Like you've got your
I
Sky
think,
and
I think the standard is very, very poor.
Really?
Oh, very poor.
TNT and Sky as well.
Yeah, across the board, I think they're very poor. Honestly, don't excite me
Right.
at all. I look at them and think, and don't forget, back in my day, you know, the technology was totally different. It was more difficult for the presenter. Now, to make a program appear seamless back then took a lot of skill.
A lot of research, a lot of all that, and you didn't have all the technology you have now and stuff.
Oh, crikey. Instant rolls, all sorts of things. Totally different. But I don't think, I mean, they recruit Sky, primarily Sky. They recruit. I don't think they recruit well. They can't audition people because those you see, for example, some of the ones on Sky Sports News, if they came through an audition process, then whoever was doing the auditioning doesn't know what the hell he's on about. Sounded like Cluffy, didn't it? He didn't know what he was on about.
But you think the likes of Carragher and Neville? I mean, listen, I like the likes because they're honest. I mean, the likes of Carragher and Neville,
absolutely.
I think they're really good at their job. If that's, you know, but I think there's some others that I think could do with a little bit more, like you say in there.
But don't forget, yes, they've now become trained television performers, ex-footballers, but now, crikey, trained television performers. Like, who remembers, you know, of the young people, young generation who watch Match of the Day now, remember Gary Lineker scoring hat-tricks for England. He's Gary Lineker, TV presenter.
Yeah, he's been.
You know, and the same would be said in the Middle East for Andy Gray.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I just don't think they're selective enough.
Yeah.
And let's face it, what a job it is to have. I mean, nowadays there must be say 50 jobs at Sky in the sports presentation field. There must be, if you include Sky Sports News.
Yeah.
There must be that. You know, back in my day, to present live football on television, there was one job, and I was very, very fortunate to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just the one job.
Your most, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but was there any, obviously you mentioned the 77 cup final or whatever it was at Saint Etienne, was there any other games that really stood out for you, you know, that you've been commentating or reporting on and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
Is there any others that stick out?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. What ones were they?
Bayern Munich, Goodison Park, 1985.
The semi-final.
Brilliant.
What was that night like?
Oh, epic. Absolutely epic. Yes, I love Rotterdam. It's like that. I can't differentiate between the semi against Bayern and the final against Rapid Vienna. We were favourites against Rapid Vienna in the final. Not sure we were against, but even though we got 0-0 over there, I don't think they're one of the mighty powers of European football.
Yeah.
And we weren't. Our record in Europe prior to that was crap, prior to that seed, and we'd not exactly played the most illustrious sides in the build-up to the semi. But we got a draw, 0-0 over there, very, very respectable scoreline in Munich. And then, of course, came, that night. Goodison Park was just, it was throbbing. It was vibrating. It was incredible. I have never, even back in the 60s when we won the league, in 1970 when we won the league, that for me, the atmosphere was just
special.
Absolutely.
A lot of Blues who they said that night at Goodison. I was only a kid then, do you know what I mean? And I when you see it back and stuff, and
it's like the Saint Etienne nights at Anfield. I went back to Radio City after that and said, you've got to watch the highlights on Granada on this game. It wasn't the same. The same for Bayern Munich, You
had to be there.
You had to be, just had to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could feel, you could cut the atmosphere. You had a knife, you could have a slice of that,
Yeah, yeah.
It was fabulous because I was on duty, I was working, but only as a reporter, in other words, after match reaction, and so I was at the top of the tunnel, and the final whistle had gone. Of course, the place erupted. I actually had to leg it down
the tunnel
to the tunnel area where there's a camera waiting and a microphone. And the team started to come in, and the guy I wanted, obviously, because he terrorised Bayern Munich. That was Andy, and he was actually first up. And he was right. He spotted me. I had a mic in my hand, so it was pretty obvious what I was doing there. And he just went straight to me.
And you got that interview.
Wow,
Both of you buzzing, obviously, because what had just gone on and stuff like that.
Oh, it was. I would say the best atmosphere I've experienced at Goodison. So I've been I've been going for over 60 years. Not as many now. I don't go as many times now as I used to. But if I had a quid for every time I went to Goodison, I'd be a very rich man. But no, I don't go as often now. I'll always be a Blue. Always be a Blue.
Yeah.
And I'll always support them. But, like watching the Brighton game last week, I found myself getting annoyed and frustrated. I thought, if my club come to this...
I'm going to get onto that towards. We've only got a couple of questions left. I'm going to get onto our season with Everton, but I know you're very active on Twitter. It's now X. Interacting with Evertonians and other fans and stuff.
Yeah.
And having put your own point of view across and stuff. How'd you get on with that? Like, how'd you enjoy interacting and stuff?
Well, I enjoy it. There are a few keyboard warriors out there who take great joy in slagging me off or criticising the opinion I make. But I think I'm better informed than most on there from my inside knowledge of football.
It's your opinion as well, isn't it? And everyone's
yeah,
entitled
I've got
to
my
opinion.
opinion too, yeah. But the longevity I've got of being involved in football since 1970, when I first went to the Weekly News, you know, like getting new Shankly. You know, I think my opinion probably means more than most.
Yeah.
I think.
And just, you give as good as you get. I see on, you know, on X and
certainly.
stuff. I see it. I do see it, like
Oh,
you say. But like I say, you know, it's one of those on social media that there's a lot of people who, you know,
Yeah.
it's and I think it's good for some things, but sometimes it can be
I don't tweet purely about Everton. I mean, I do
across the board. It's just like
anything. For example, there was cropped up yesterday about Paul Simon. You know, as in Simon and Garfunkel.
yeah, you're the singer, yeah.
That I saw him. I was 14, and a friend of the family, who's about 19, took me to Widnes, the Queen Elizabeth Hall in Widnes, to watch Paul Simon, not with Garfunkel, just
The Queen's
Paul
Hall
Simon.
and Widnes.
Queen Elizabeth Hall.
Yeah, the Queen's Hall he used to call it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, went there.
And he was on there, was he? Yeah.
Yeah. The following day, and this was what went on Twitter, the following day at Widnes Station, he wrote Homeward Bound, or the first. He certainly got through, I'm sitting at a railway station, got a ticket for my destination. He certainly got that much down at Widnes Station, because let's face it, if you were at Widnes Station, you'd want to go home, wouldn't you? I mean, if you were in Widnes, you'd want to go home. You know, breathing in the fumes, which there were in those days. You'd think, Christ, let me get back to California, or New York in his case. Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. I knew what I knew what I was.
So there was a debate, was there?
I knew what I was talking. People coming, it was Warrington, wasn't it, or something like that. No, he didn't. Of course he did.
So it's just going backwards and
Oh
forwards.
yeah, but it's good fun.
But it's all good. It's all, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like I say, it's one of those. But going back to our team, Everton, like you say, this season, the new stadium and the potential takeover of the club, you just touched on our performance last week, opening game against Brighton.
I somehow thought that, you know, the start of this season would see an improvement on the last 2 or 3. What I saw against Brighton was as bad as I've seen. Second half, put it that way. The club is in a mess, and until there's a takeover, it will stay as a mess. Now, the takeover doesn't look as if it's imminent, so we could be so far down that it'll be too late to get back up.
I mean,
if it carries on like
but like
this.
I say, look, it's the first game of the season. I think.
I know what I saw.
Yeah. No, well, listen, I'm not going to say. We've just been discussing this in the car on the way up, and I think Dyche, he got it wrong, and sometimes you've got to hold your hands up and go, look, picking Young, picking Keane, when you've brought this new kid, you know. From,
I mean, 2-0 down at home, and he brings Holgate on. The fans can't stand Holgate. Nothing against the lad as a person.
I just don't think he's done it at Everton. Let's be honest.
He was all right when he first came into the team. He was. I mean, I'm going back 3 years. You know, he looked a very promising young lad. But he just, I don't know, maybe he started earning whatever, 20 grand a week, thinking, wow, fantastic. You know, that's enough. That's all I ever wanted to do. I don't know. Don't know the lad. But he's not popular amongst the fan base. And when we're 2-0 down at home and playing crap, to bring on Mason Holgate, knowing how the fans feel about him, I thought was a stupid move from Dyche.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Dyche has done well with what he's got there, but then if you're buying players though and you've got to give these players an opportunity you've brought in. You know, if someone's not a fan's favourite, I know that's not always the case. Where
I know, for example, what my team, how I would play and who I would line up against Tottenham on Saturday away.
Yeah.
And I'd like to bet you any money that doesn't happen.
I think a lot of people have got
I'm not wrong. Because we haven't got a right back unless Roman Dixon Unless they feel he's ready.
But if you're saying this in the
He
car,
might not think he's ready.
give him a chance. He's young, he's hungry. Let him give him a
I
chance.
would, but I don't think he will.
Yeah.
So I will play 3 at the back. That's what I do to compensate for the fact we haven't got a right back.
And the left back.
Unless
was Mikalenko injured, did he go off once, or was he? I think he was. But like again,
I would actually put him as I would actually put him in the back 3.
Who? Mikalenko?
Yeah, I'd play, well, until Branthwaite's fit, I'd play O'Brien, Tarkowski, and Mikalenko as 3. Mikalenko can play centre half. Don't worry about that. So I'd have 2 wing backs. We haven't got a right back, so we have to play a wing back. So I'll probably put Harrison, even though he favoured his left foot, but he's all right there. Harrison on the right and McNeil on the left. And I'd also find a space for the 2 new guys, the 3 new guys. Tim, I still can't pronounce his surname.
Yeah, he was fantastic on Saturday for us. Like the kid who's come from.
I think he will be more effective long term than Onana was. I have nothing against Onana. I think he's classy, but I don't think he's really found his niche yet.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't think Tim has either. But I think he will, and I think he'll find it quicker than Onana did.
Yeah. Let's hopefully we can go to Tottenham on Saturday and get something, because I think, you know, as the season starts and the games start coming, we've got to start picking points up. I know it's only the first game, but we want to start trying to find a team, not chomping and changing all the time. A team that's going to.
I've looked at the fixtures. I've looked at the fixtures for about the next 2-3 months. The only one where I could feel confident of a victory is Doncaster in the Cup.
So that's on Tuesday night next week.
The Luton game last season. Took my grandkids. Cherry picked the game. We can't lose that. We lost. Brighton at home. I wasn't confident. I said so on Twitter. I was not confident. Once I saw the starting 11, I remember I tweeted, pessimism kicking in here. I don't like the starting 11. And I wasn't wrong. No,
you wasn't, like many other fans. Elton going into the new stadium, obviously next season. We've obviously got to be in the Premier League. It looks fantastic, the new stadium.
I hope indeed we do go in as a Premier League team.
It would be catastrophic if we didn't. But I think we've got enough. Don't get me wrong. I just think, people. I think Dice on Saturday, he's got to hold his hands up and go, look, I picked the wrong team there. But he's very stubborn. It's like,
yes, he is.
But you got to hold your hands up and say.
I think he's got a soft spot for certain players.
Yeah.
Keane, for example. I think he's got.
Well, O'Brien's played, pre-season. He scored a couple of goals, and he looks quality. We give him a go, but we don't pick.
Although in defence of Dyche on that score and leaving out, the other 2, Nadai and what's his name,
Lindstrom.
But he did play Tim. But you look at some clubs over the first weekend of the season who signed quite a few players during the summer. Very few of those new players played. It's just a thing with managers. You haven't play one, which he did with Tim. I suppose he had to play him. But with the others, have them on the bench, let them have a look, slowly integrate them into the match day way of thinking, the way we do things on a match day. But I can see that, and he's certainly not alone in applying that sort of thing. He's certainly not alone.
No, that's it, isn't it?
But I agree with you. Come Tottenham.
Let's hope he does change it.
Yeah, correct.
Elton, listen, I just want to say thank you very much for letting us come over and do the podcast with yourself. And I just want to say thank you very much for sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with us. Cheers.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Cheers.